there, guys. So this is a surprise Valentine's special. And today we're going to be chatting all about the goddess Morrigan, self-love and self-reliance. And I have the lovely Nina from, let me try and pronounce this right, because she told me this 2 seconds ago, Panteria. Is that right? Did I say it right? Sorry, guys. I've got a sore throat and everything I say is coming out like... So it's, how are you? How are you doing?
Good. I just got home from work. It's been a long day, so I'm excited to chat about this. So yeah.
Cool. So I was originally gonna put this later in the week, but I've decided to put this up on Valentine's Day because I was thinking about self-reliance and self-love anyway, and I think energies of this type do come up around Valentine's Day. Happy Valentine's Day, everybody. And I think it's a good topic to kind of get our teeth into, especially under the goddess Morrigan. Because people have this really weird thing that happens that they kind of see the goddess Morrigan as in a very specific way, and they don't bring in like empowerment into that. They don't bring like sovereignty into it. They don't bring self-love into it because the Morrigan can't be loving. Supposedly, have you found that people are like, no, it's too fluffy to be involved with Morrigan, self-love and that sort of thing?
I think because I watch, like, I have mostly women, not just women, but mostly the women that I've learned about the Morrigan, aside from my first-hand experience with her, are women who realize that she is she is loving and she does promote those things. So I guess no, but I have heard from, like, even from your videos and stuff that that's not a thing. And I'm like, well, why not? Why not?
Maybe it's best if we start with what we think like self-reliance and self-love are, rather than, so what does it mean to us? Maybe that would be, and then we can like pull into the Morriganic lessons of self-love and self-reliance, because I don't think she would cover all lessons of self-love and self-reliance. Definitely not for me anyway, because I had Lilith come through for certain lessons. But so what do we think self-love is, first and foremost? Do you want to go first, or shall I go first?
You can go first.
It's a big question. You do it. That's dropping me in it. Okay. So me, self-love has definitely been a journey. And I feel that we all go through cycles of self-love. And I was talking about this recently on the blog, because there's this idea in spirituality that you kind of attain and achieve self-love and then you're there and you're great. And I don't feel like that's what happens. For me, it's very cyclic. Like, if you're a witch or if you're into spirituality, then you're in tune with the energies of the world around you, of nature, cycles of the moon, so on and so forth. And I definitely feel like we all have emotional cycles within us anyway. And so sometimes our self-love is like at a high. We're feeling proud of ourselves, we're feeling in our own power, we're feeling empowered, we feel happy with ourselves, we're being a friend to ourselves, we're encouraging ourselves, but also cracking the whip and being like, this is where we need to improve. Because I don't feel that self-love is without responsibility either, because sometimes self-love gets promoted as something which is without consequence, but it's like, no, if you need to improve yourself, that's still self-love, even when it's tough self-love. So for me, we all go through these lessons of self-love, and sometimes we're up there and sometimes we're not. Sometimes we are like feeling the shadow lessons. Sometimes maybe we're depressed, maybe we're anxious, maybe we're just going through an emotional tumultuous time. Sometimes, we're not being our friend, we are blaming ourselves for everything, and there's a difference between blame and accountability. And we are like being our own worst enemy, basically, because the one person who can always drag us down more than anyone is definitely ourselves. So I think we definitely go through these cycles, and it's worth kind of looking at what triggers each sort of cycle, and what energy and what emotional response and what moments really get us to one place versus another. And I feel like that to me is what self-love is. It's the journey between all elements of the self, that kind of journey. And it's sometimes we need to just push ourselves up in one direction. So sometimes we need to hold ourselves accountable, like I said. Sometimes we need to encourage ourselves. Sometimes we need to be proud of ourselves in a world that doesn't really encourage that, especially in spiritual circles. Because I always say to people who've like survived a lot, I'm like, first step, be proud that you're here. And so many people have like difficulties with it, because being proud of ourselves is something we're not really taught to do in spiritual circles. So I feel like that is kind of how I feel about self-love. So now it's your turn.
My turn to answer that huge topic, which has taken my entire life to explore. Whoa. I definitely agree with basically everything that you've said, but I definitely feel I agree with the cyclical bit. I definitely feel like that's how I've experienced it. And also because of the cycles and the nature of the lessons that we learn on the self-love journey, whatever that looks like for each person, self-love constantly redefines itself. So when I first began I began my self-love journey somewhere in high school, where I realized that step one of self-love was, how do I not look in the mirror and hate myself every time I see my reflection, or I see myself acting a certain way, and that was step one, right? And then another time self-love was, how do I even if though it might bother other people, how do I honor what my soul needs in this particular time? And that came with difficult emotions, difficult reactions, but that was the thing that was the most self-loving. So that how does Nina become a sovereign, full, high expression of herself, regardless of what anybody else thinks, as long as I'm happy with that? So that kind of thing, and just being able to basically realize, like, what is it that I need in this moment? And then at one point the lesson was, sometimes self-love isn't kind and fluffy, and it's not about, I think another part of the spiritual especially spiritual, I guess, facade, and when we look at pretty Instagram pictures, everyone assumes that self-love is pretty, rose petal baths, and self-love is getting a massage, and but self-love is also the days when you're falling apart on the bathroom floor and you think everything is shit, basically, but you're gonna hold yourself through that pain anyway, and that is equally as self-love as is the pretty bath at the end of the day. But it comes in many forms, and it's constantly changing, and it's like, okay, well, you have hit this period of self-love, now this is the new challenge, and can you honor yourself anyway? And I think for me, the big point on my self-love journey was realizing that I was worthy of life and love and good things just because I existed. I didn't have to meet any certain criteria to be a worthy human being, and that was another step of my self-love journey, I guess. So it's like, it's constantly evolving. I'll probably, in a year's time, if you ask me the same question, I'll probably have a different answer, because I will learn new lessons. And so, but I definitely agree with all of the things that you said as well.
It's definitely transformative. I think that's really an interesting thing that you brought up, and that's really true, that what we believe to be self-love definitely evolves, and we evolve and we change. And it's interesting because I feel like there are very stereotypical ideas of what self-love is and what it looks like. And one of them, you already hit on it, which is like the bubble bath, basically. That's probably like the easiest example that people give themselves. And yet it can come into your life in so many different ways. so many different shapes and forms, and it's always transformative because it's allowing you to be who you are. And I feel like that's one of the core principles of spirituality, which is taking away all the layers of conditioning, taking away all the ideas of who you're supposed to be or who you're meant to be, and just getting back to who you are. And that feels very Morriganic in Journey to me, like stripping away all the layers of things that we use to cover up who we are and get back to who we are at core, I think. Do you feel like that's something that the Morrigan definitely influences for you, or has that not been quite so much?
Well, yeah, it's definitely, it's stripping away at who, so before, when I basically approached you saying that, hey, I would absolutely love to talk about the Morrigan, I did mention that actually my journey with the Morrigan hasn't been too long, but she came to me in a time where she actually came to me after a message I had sent you that you made. I don't even know if you remember, but basically I made a pretty difficult decision with my family during summertime, and that bursted it. Like, they went on their own journey with whatever reaction they had to that, and it was hurtful and it sucked. And she came to me at a time going, at a time basically presenting this lesson of, this is what you thought Nina was and who everyone thought Nina was. This is what it meant for you to be even a woman, like what it means to be a woman in the family structure that I came from. And now you're going to go and redefine that for yourself. What beliefs are yours and what beliefs are something somebody else has just stuck onto you like a post-it, going, okay, well, this is who you are and this is what it means. And it was going, well, F that. I don't want any of, what if I don't want any of this? And now I get to, and the next few months and until now, but especially in the beginning of the aftermath of this sort of next, initiation into my power, I guess, because it was a form of empowerment, taking all of that back, it wasn't easy. It was looking at all the things that I denied, I didn't know were there, were looking in the shadows. It was reclaiming anger that I had about certain things, and that it was all right to be angry, because a big thing for me while I was growing up was being the good girl who never got angry about stuff. And Morrigan was like, well, no, actually, your rage is freaking sacred. Go, be mad. You get to, that's your right. Even that's self-loving too, is to own that. And all of that kind of stuff. So yes, definitely, I definitely feel that she sends you back to going, oh, well, like, you think you were this, but actually, are you really? And go figure that out and peel those layers and be raw and bloody and get angry, and it's cool. Do it.
Yeah, I think we should absolutely talk about that, because anger and rage and wrath and things can actually be self-love, and people are probably really like, what now? Like, I came here thinking it was going to be soft and sweet, and no, it's Morrigan. So but I can she can, not be, I don't know if I would use the word sweet, but like, she has I guess a softer-ish side to me, at least when she engages with me. But she's also comes in with some hardcore guns blazing, going, okay, we're gonna do this. Let's go. I absolutely think she's all elements of goddess. I think seeing her through a narrow perception of she's only this is trying to fit a goddess through a keyhole, and it's not going to work, really. But the anger as self-love is something that I think is really, really important. And looking at how we engage with anger and how we alchemize anger into our spiritual path is really interesting, because so many spiritual denominations, they basically make out that things like anger are a bad thing, right? A bad emotion, something to be avoided, something to be meditated out of your system. And it's actually always, to me, been, sometimes you need to be angry. Sometimes that's justifiable. Sometimes that's a natural reaction. We're supposed to have all the emotional reactions in our lifetime. We're here to experience as much as we can in this incarnation. I honestly feel like anger can be self-love, because if, say you're say for example you're in a situation where somebody is using you, or like it's a bad situation, right? Then turning the other cheek constantly and continuing to be in that bad situation is not going to transform the situation, and it's not going to transform who you are on the inside. So I really feel like anger is like the first step to like breaking whatever it is that is chaining you up. And that becomes a form of self-love, because you're tearing down the outmoded, you're tearing down the chains of things that like keep you stuck in bad patterns of emotional behavior or physical location around people who are putting on you in different ways. So I feel like anger is honestly like a catalyst of self-love. Like, no, I'm worth more than this, and I'm not going to put up with this anymore. And it can get quite angry, but then it kind of just breaks and starts that sort of phoenix-like transformation, because it's basically, anger is the fire that starts like consuming everything, and then you rise from that, I think.
I definitely agree. And I'm a big believer that all emotions are valid. We should be experience all of them. There's a reason they exist, I guess. It's pretty, like, that's how simple it is for me. And every emotion comes with a message to inform us about like different parts of ourselves that we're ready to go explore. And I run a women's circle where I live. And one of the things that I always try to talk about with the other women is the idea, in a world where our needs, for the most part, especially as children, are taught to come last. I've always seen anger as a message, not in all cases, but for a lot of people, it's a message of realizing, oh, this person crossed a boundary in a need I didn't know I even had, and now my emotional body is inviting me to go, oh wait, I'm not okay with this actually, and so now I know what to do with that for next time, and go, okay, well, this is where my boundary is, and I'm not overstepping that. But if you don't have that anger, you will never know that was a need. And it's like post realizing that you didn't know what your needs were, and now you do, through this emotion that is anger. And it's just letting you know the next stage of more about who you are, I guess.
Which is kind of the whole point, is this transformation and discovery of self. So it kind of feeds back into that evolution, I guess. And we're actually touching on self-reliance now, because that's coming into self-reliance a little bit, I think. So shall we talk about how we feel about self-reliance? And so we did that for self-love. Do you think that would work? Let's do that.
Okay.
You get to go first this time.
Yay! Woo! This is a big topic, and I guess it can go in many ways. I'm going to see, I guess, off the top of my head, one of the one of the ways that I see self-reliance is to realize where, I guess it also is part of self-love and validation, is realizing that for the most part, other people can give us our needs, and they will. We're not islands unto ourselves, I guess. But it's this idea that a large part of that self-love journey is to be able to rely on ourselves to meet our own needs first. And even being able to self-validate and self-coax and mother ourselves, and that's like all of those needs that I guess that we we are so desperately taught to seek from other human beings to fill us up. And I guess, and that's been my journey with self-reliance, is realizing that there are things that only I can meet for myself first and foremost. And through that reliance on myself, I actually set an example to the people and life around me about going, well, this is how I want to be treated, and this is how I want to be taken care of. And knowing that I can do that for myself first and foremost before anyone else can.
Yeah. So my journey for self-reliance has definitely been very Morriganic in theme. And I was talking a little bit about this to Amber the other week. And it definitely is, for a lot of people under the Morrigan, self-love and self-reliance are two areas which we struggle with. For a host of different reasons. A lot of the people who the Morrigan calls upon have had very difficult situations. And like you already said, she came to you in a particular point in your life where it was traumatic. It was difficult. There was a lot going on, and it was challenging who you are on every level. And I think that's true for a lot of people who feel called on by the Morrigan, that they come out from a place of pain and like demoralization, and their whole life has been blown apart in one way or another, and the Morrigan comes in at that point where they're already like, okay, who even am I now? And so everything that they knew as being who they were has been taken away. And self-reliance is the journey, and self-love is the journey back to knowing that you can cope, survive, thrive, alchemize, all of that by yourself if necessary. Now, there are people who are like, you should never love anyone, and you're not be in a relationship unless you first completely love yourself. I don't agree with that idea. I think that we are always in, like I said, we're always in flux of how we feel about ourselves and how self-reliant we even are. We all have ups and downs, ebbs and flows, basically, of these feelings within ourselves. And the idea that we're going to be like completely 100% and then we're going to be fine to be in relationships or friendships or whatever it is with other people is not realistic. So for me, it's been kind of, where is the line between the idea of who I am, who I've been told to be, and who I'm becoming? And I think a really good example of this is kind of like the damsel in distress thing that happens in our society, where women are kind of almost conditioned to think like somebody's going to ride in and save them, right? And there's a lot of talk around all of this growing up, what influences, the princess thing that happens. The stories, say for like Disney, they're getting better, I think, but it's still definitely something which is in our society, which is, somebody's going to come and they're going to sweep you off your feet and it's going to be fine. And I had always been quite fiercely independent as a young girl, and then I kind of had that drain away after a certain point, just because of everything I'd been through. And I got to a point where I just wanted people to, I just wanted to be looked after for a while. And it was actually really detrimental to me. It was not good for me. And it opened up the door to like people who are basically taking advantage of women who want to be looked after. And there are women who use other people in the flip of that to look after them for money, for fame, for whatever it is. And for me, it became about, like you said, learning that people can definitely help you with your needs from other people, but ultimately you have to fill your own cup. It's no one is gonna give you the world, and they can't. They're not capable of it. Like, other people can't give you everything you need. You are a complicated, evolving, multi-layered soul in a human suit wheeling through the universe. You're going to change, you're going to shift, you're going to grow. You don't know what your needs are going to be a year from now, 5 years from now. It can be drastically different. And the more you learn and evolve and grow, the more your needs and values are going to shift. So the only person who's completely in harmony with your shifts is you. And the only person who completely understands that is you know the process, you know how it feels, you know where the shadows come in, you know when you're overreacting to things. And that's not to say you can't build solid friendships and relationships and all the rest of it. You absolutely can. You can learn to be in harmony with people, for sure. But for me, self-reliance is a journey of independence in a lot of ways, which is like, I'm going to be doing this thing that I believe in, that I'm passionate about, and nobody else gets a say. That comes into business very strongly for me, for like heart-centered business and things. Like, this is who I am. This is my pillar. This is where I'm standing on. This matters to me, as the videos do, as talking about the Morrigan does. And so nobody else really gets to influence that. And so that's how independence has evolved in one way. And then with relationships, for me personally right now, I don't feel the need to be chasing after a brand new relationship while I'm healing. And I think that was a major step in self-love and self-reliance, because it's like, I'm going to get right with myself before I worry about getting right with anyone else. And I think that for me has been a massive lesson of self-reliance and self-love.
Amen to all of that. That was, yeah. And I so get the damsel in distress thing, because aside from what happened like it last year, it was I guess a part two to I guess also I've had a traumatic childhood and stuff like that, and I very quickly went from when the depression and anxiety started, when I was actually quite fairly young. By all of this wonderful romance story that we were constantly told over and over again, I was like, yeah, okay, so a man is gonna come in, he's gonna sweep me off my feet, and he's gonna make me feel whole. And I could, even from the beginning, like when I first started to even get into relationships, I could tell I had that expectation. I wanted to be saved. I wanted somebody to complete me. I wanted this. I wanted that. And actually, the relationship of highly volatile love was this awesome thing to like, oh, it must be romance. I was like, no. And I kept getting into the same situation over and over again, where I essentially took my power and was like, here you go, now you're gonna fix this. And every time they would continue to disappoint and continue to hurt, until I eventually got the message that, hey, nobody is gonna save you but yourself. And it was, and I definitely didn't get into like my first, so I guess probably the relationship that I'm in now, and we've been together for about over 3 years, this would be the most normal relationship emotionally wise that I guess I've had. And even then, we had so many layers to unpeel as to where I was still expected to be saved and taken care of, and realizing that, and also where I played certain roles. And it wasn't until I realized that I could basically only love myself. Stage one was, okay, I need to fill myself up and have enough of my own self-worth before I can even begin to match a sort of equal who can actually, is not feeding off of me, is not expecting me to go fill themselves up, that doesn't feel ultimately burdened by the fact that, because the one way that I try to explain it to people is that, imagine if you're a human being trying to figure out how it is to love yourself, to expect to fill yourself up and then save another person on top of that while you're trying so hard to build. That's a lot. It's sometimes so much for us just to carry ourselves. How are we, and to expect somebody to do that for you just doesn't make a lot of sense. And then it's a realization after that, okay, I will get into a relationship whether I'm fully love myself or not. But the work doesn't end the moment you get into that relationship. You're still learning how to love yourself. You're still learning, boundaries and where you're expected, like we're expecting someone to be saved, where you're all sorts of things, I guess. So it's like in both.
Yeah.
Like
I should probably say, like, as well, it's not the ultimate goal to get yourself into a relationship. Self-love is not like a pathway to getting yourself to be with somebody else.
Yeah.
But I think that it's a good thing to talk about, because the way that we're driven into like relationships and love and the energies of that is very prominent in our society, in the West in particular. And it's not that, I don't think either of us are saying like you have to love yourself and then a relationship will happen and it'll be great. What we're saying is that it's often that relationships with other people are used as a crutch to feeling better about ourselves, and that damsel in distress thing is definitely something that happens, and it'll happen to guys too, and it'll happen in all relationships. It's not just heterosexual man-woman relationships. Everybody struggles with self-worth for a whole host of different reasons. So it's not necessarily that the relationship is the big goal here. And
realize it. And it was also one thing that I like. So while I was trying to get myself, I guess, into because there's like, I guess the way that I tried to explain it is, everyone, when you're like growing up, I guess, has that like, okay, this is the big category or the big dream that I have that I want to get. And for me, from a young age, I could even begin to understand what romantic love meant. For me, was to find my partner, right? And we were gonna have this epic romance, and it was gonna be amazing, and blah blah blah. And at the same time, while trying to search for that, I experienced a lot of depression, a lot of loneliness, a lot of trauma, all sorts of things. And then I got my version of my romance, and realized none of those other things have gone away, and they still need my time and attention and healing. And also realizing that it's so much more about, then it was like, oh, aside from this loving relationship that I have, what is Nina here on this earth to do, and what's my purpose, and how do I serve the world, and how do and I got that thing that I desperately wanted. And then I realized, well, actually there are more bigger questions. And it's not to say that I'm not super grateful, but I also know that my life isn't equal to my romantic relationship, and that I wanted way more things. And I know this is a strange comparison, but it's like, even the idea of, let's say, women are supposed to grow up to be moms, and I realize when mothers, do their job, right, and they raise their child, and now they're off living their own sovereign life, how many moms who were just moms turn around going, hey, I wish I was more than just a mom. I wish I could have gone out and done this and gone out to do that. And the same thing comes with romantic relationship, and any relationship is, it's great, and it's going to be, and I hope for most people it's a thriving part of their life, but you are way more than the relationships that you have, in the same way that you're way more than the career that you have, and the house that you have, whatever it is. So it's you know, it's a chapter, not necessarily the whole book, and that's okay.
Yeah. And it definitely has shifted for me as well. Like, I used to feel that way that you felt, like I really wanted to be madly, completely in love with somebody, right? And it to be passionate. And I think it's, for me, it came from a difficult, broken childhood and seeing a failed and messed up marriage. So what I wanted was like the one, right? The idea of the one. And now, honestly, I just want someone with that warrior vibe who is strong enough to run with me. That kind of vibe. Like, that's what it's the shift in who we are. And sometimes our wants kind of reflects where we're at, I think, in our self-love journey. Because when we are at like full self-love and when we're at full self-reliance, we're more picky about what we invite into our space.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think in my life now, and especially since I started my channel and my spiritual business, for me, it's my life is about how do I live in my purpose and how do I serve this world? How do I push through my limitations? And nowadays, it's if my partner can't meet me there, can't get super psyched about some kind of vision that's bigger than themselves, there's only so much we're going to be able to talk about. Because
I'm like clapping. I'm excited. Like that exactly. Oh my God. I'm so excited.
Yeah, like that's what it is. Like, and in the beginning it was, that's what I'm saying. It's when my self-love journey started, it was, hey, I don't like myself at all. I actually despise my existence. How do I get out of that? And now it's, how do I honor myself and my sacred purpose, and then have my whole world reflect that too, whether it's my friends or it's the person that I love, and at the same time, at least like for me, love in not in its relationship sense, but love as in what I believe is the universal energy that makes up life, right? Is how can I be the highest expression of that back? So it's like, how do I get to be who I am and radiate love and let that seep into the world? And yeah, and that includes myself and other people, and yeah, that's basically it. I guess.
So I think maybe a good thing to maybe answer is like, what if somebody came to us and they were saying, right, I'm at the stage where I don't like myself. How do I get from feeling that way to caring about my place in the universe, like my spiritual journey, my spiritual service, and being and feeling love? So what would you advise somebody who was in that space where they didn't like themselves on their self-love journey? What would you recommend?
Straight up, to find some kind of support system that has an objective point of view, right? Because as much as families are awesome and friends are awesome and romantic partners are often, it wasn't until like two big things that, I mean, it was like, whether it's therapy or whether it's going for meditation or somewhere where I don't know, like a professional in whatever sector of life, I guess they're in, whether that's spiritual or therapy.
Or both.
Or both. Yeah, why not both? Just sees you with life experience and with knowing how to hold sacred space for people. I guess that's the best way I can describe it. I mean, for me, my self-love journey, the first thing that I did for myself is meditation really, really helped me. It was, I didn't realize it was an act of self-love. Then it was more, these thoughts in my head are constantly speaking about stuff. And they won't shut off. how do I make it stop?
Mm-hmm.
That was just the beginning. And then it was actually just easing my mind and then figuring out, like, then it was being able to create enough space to realize, oh, I think all of these things, where do they come from and are they actually true?
Mm.
And I think meditation for me was a big deal because it actually gave me enough spaciousness to then begin to answer other questions.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that was step one. How do I actually create that spaciousness first? And whether that was through a meditation and I think I actually didn't go to a therapist until this situation that happened recently, but I could tell why it could be such a and I wish when I was that age, I could have gone to therapy like I actually then wanted, but the circumstances didn't allow me to. And just to have somebody there with objective perspective, right, that sees you for who you are in that moment, not through all of these preconceived notions you've built around yourself,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's just, and have somebody feedback you and talk you through it. And I think step one is figuring out where all of this stuff came from and why you've been taught to believe that it's true before you can even shed it and decide whether it is true. I don't have no idea if I'm making sense. I'm just rambling.
No, it does absolutely. I was going to say you can kind of back that up with self-work as well. So if you need counseling or therapy or whatever it is, like, don't feel ashamed and don't feel like you've lost to anybody who's feeling that they might need those things. Most people at some point in their life have counseling or therapy, like most people, and it's actually hugely helpful. So don't be ashamed if you need those things, for sure.
So helpful.
Yeah.
And even like I realized after my because for me actually going to therapy was my act of self-love. So the peak of my depression in high school was when I was around 15, and I almost went, and I really wanted to go to therapy, but money and distance and other things, and I guess my family's then not understanding of the severity of the emotions that I was experiencing, right? And I didn't need to go, but actually as a form of self-love, to honor that girl, having my own resources that I have now, being able to pay for myself, being able to do stuff for myself, I was like, actually, no, for me, this is a sacred act of self-love because I get to honor the girl who didn't get the chance to go. So now I'm going to go. And at first I had this feeling of, oh, well, I must, like, all of my healing journey until now must have not counted if I have to really go to therapy. Right? That's how I felt about it. And then it was such a great decision. And I realized you don't necessarily have to go to therapy even when something is highly serious. When you're confused about something, when you're stuck about something, to have that person who is just a mirror to go, well, have you thought of this? Do you really think this? Did you hear what you just said? To have that. And it doesn't have to be a therapy. Any objective person that can relay back to you what it is that you're saying, because sometimes we don't even hear what we're talking about.
So something that I've done 3 years in a row now is I've gone to Kellyanne Maddox for a New Year's reading. And that is something which is complementary to things like counseling and things like tarot readings and things of people who really feel it, like they're in sync with it, and Kellyanne is one of the best, and that really helps me to put things in perspective. And I knew that this year was looking at self-love in a big way for me, and I definitely wanted her insight into it from a divinational perspective. And I think that you can pull on all these different threads to help you people out there, if you're feeling like you don't like yourself, right, you can pull on the availability of things like counseling, like we said. You can pull on different areas of spirituality, whether it be tarot, divination, healing work. You mentioned a women's temple. I've actually been going to a red tent since I moved, and that has been hugely healing and connective. And that's ritual and connection and release, and all these different things can help us. We can journal, we can write down things and notice the patterns in ourselves. We can get in flow with the cycles of self-love, self-reliance, and see where they're coming from. So we're approaching time now. So if you had to say one Morriganic vibration, sentence, lesson that was the most powerful to you for self-love or self-reliance, what would that be?
I was born resilient as fuck.
That's amazing. I love that so much.
I was like trying to find a nicer word. I was like, you know what? That. Yeah. And it was the greatest gift that she gave me, because I had a hard time with the Morrigan choosing me in the beginning, because I was like, I'm not a warrior. I don't see myself as a fighter. I have no idea why. Why is she here? And when my therapist turned around and she went, have you seen all of the things that you've survived? You're resilient. Own it. And that was like, okay, now I get it. Now I get why she showed up.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. She stole my line. I don't know what to say now. I was like, yeah. So I guess for other people, you were born for this, because you are the only person who can be your own worst enemy. So you are the person who can be your own warrior, your own general, your own cheerleading squad. You've got this, and you can absolutely do it. I guess that's what I'll do.
Yeah. I agree to all those things.
So thank you so much for coming on today and chatting to me about self-love and self-reliance.
It was amazing to be on. I'm so grateful that you had me. Thank you.
You're so welcome. And if you guys would like to see more, I will pop all her links down there, down below, down here somewhere in the ow, in the smacking my microphone with my hand. Ow! That's way to end the video. For the pain, you know it's a Morrigan video. Woo! So thank you so much again. And we're going to end the recording right here. So we'll see you guys soon. Bye.
Bye.